A moment of weakness, a lifetime of regret. Claire sat on the edge of the king-sized bed, her hands trembling as she held her phone. The message she had typed out to her husband, Daniel, remained unsent. Her heart pounded in her chest as the events of the past few weeks replayed in her mind, each moment a cruel reminder of the betrayal she had committed. Daniel was everything a woman could ask for: loyal, kind, hardworking, and deeply in love with her. They had been married for 8 years, built a life together, and shared dreams of growing old side by side. But something had shifted in Claire's heart over the past year. It wasn't that she stopped loving him, but rather she had lost sight of how much he meant to her. Routine had taken over passion, predictability had replaced excitement, and somewhere in between she had allowed herself to drift. It started innocently enough. A corporate retreat, a luxurious resort by the ocean, and a handsome colleague named Marcus, who had always been charming and charismatic. They had worked together for 3 years, but she had never thought of him in a romantic way until that weekend. Their conversations became more personal, his attention more intense. And before she knew it, she was confiding in him about things she had never told anyone. He listened in a way Daniel hadn't in years. Or at least, that's what she had convinced herself. The moment it happened, Claire knew she had made a terrible mistake. It wasn't planned. It wasn't something she had sought out. One glass of wine turned into 3, an intimate conversation turned into a lingering touch, and then she found herself in his hotel room. The guilt was immediate, a crushing weight that settled into her bones even before she slipped back into her own bed that night. The next morning, Claire avoided Marcus as much as she could. He seemed unaffected, acting as if nothing had happened. But Claire? She felt sick to her stomach. When she returned home, she couldn't look Daniel in the eyes without feeling like a fraud. He greeted her with warmth, oblivious to the darkness festering inside her. He kissed her forehead, ran his fingers through her hair, and told her he had missed her. The days that followed were unbearable. Every moment she spent with Daniel became a reminder of how much she had betrayed him. The sound of his laughter, the way he absent-mindedly reached for her hand, the way he trusted her so completely, it all became torture. She wanted to tell him, but the thought of breaking his heart paralyzed her. The worst part was that he had started to notice. "You've been distant lately. Is everything okay?" he asked one evening as they sat on the couch. His blue eyes searched hers, filled with concern. Claire forced a smile and lied. "Just stressed from work." That night, she lay awake next to him, staring at the ceiling. She couldn't keep this secret forever. Every time he held her, every time he whispered that he loved her, she felt the weight of her guilt crushing her. She knew she had to confess. One evening, after dinner, Claire finally gathered the courage. Her hands shook as she reached for his. "Daniel, I need to tell you something," she whispered. He frowned, concern etched into his features. "What is it, Claire?" Tears welled up in her eyes as she inhaled sharply, her voice barely above a whisper. "I made a terrible mistake." The silence that followed was deafening. She watched as the color drained from his face, his grip on her hand loosening. His breath hitched, and when he finally spoke, his voice was hollow. "What kind of mistake?" Claire couldn't look at him. "I was unfaithful. It was just once, but it happened. I'm so sorry, Daniel. I hate myself for it." The room felt colder than ever. Daniel didn't speak for what felt like an eternity. When he finally stood up, his movements were slow, as if processing what she had just said required every ounce of his strength. He rubbed a hand over his face, exhaling shakily. "Who was it?" "It doesn't matter." "It matters to me," he snapped, pain flashing in his eyes. "A coworker? It was a mistake, Daniel. I regret it more than I can put into words." He turned away from her, his hands clenched into fists. "Why? Was I not enough? Did I do something wrong?" His voice cracked and Claire felt her own heart shatter. "No, you were perfect. It was me. I was selfish. I was weak, and I let myself get caught up in something that meant nothing. But you mean everything to me, Daniel?" He let out a bitter laugh. "Everything? If I meant everything, Claire, you wouldn't have done this." She reached for him, but he flinched away. "Please, Daniel, I love you. I don't want to lose you." He stared at her for a long time, his eyes filled with a pain she'd never seen before. Finally, he whispered, "I don't know if I can ever forgive you." That night, Daniel slept in the guest room, and Claire lay awake, drowning in regret. She had thought confessing would bring some kind of relief, but it only made the reality of her betrayal more unbearable. She had broken something precious, something that might never be repaired. Days turned into weeks. Daniel avoided her as much as he could. When they spoke, it was brief and cold. Claire tried everything: letters, heartfelt apologies, promising to do whatever it took to fix things. But trust, once broken, was not so easily restored. One evening, Daniel sat across from her at the dinner table, staring at his plate. "I don't know if I can ever look at you the same way again," he admitted. Claire's heart sank. "I'll do anything, Daniel. Please don't give up on us." He sighed, running a hand through his hair. "I need time and space. I think I need to be alone for a while." Tears streamed down Claire's face as she realized what he meant. "Are you leaving me?" "I don't know," he whispered, "but right now I just need to breathe." And with that, he stood up, grabbing his keys. He hesitated at the door, looking back at her one last time. "I loved you, Claire, more than anything, and I don't know if I can ever get that back." The door closed behind him, and Claire was left alone with the unbearable weight of her choices. She had never felt more hollow, more broken. She had gambled with the most precious thing in her life and lost. Regret is a cruel companion, and Claire knew she would carry it for the rest of her days.